Welcome back to Morning Express. We're glad you're watching. I'm Sophia Wanuna. Let's now talk books. And originally from South Africa and raised in Canada, she lives in Kenya with her husband, her 2 children, and an assortment of animals with varying degrees of wildness. She says, and I quote, "When I'm not writing, daydreaming, or hosting Africa Creates radio show, I pretend to work as an environmental consultant." That is Vered Esani, and today we review her book, Diary of a Part-Time Ghost, a book about a 15-year-old Ash who wants nothing more than to be a normal child and avoid trouble. And then his birthday gift transforms him into a ghost and zaps him back in time to the beginning of the American Revolution. Here's more on our book review today. Vered Esani, thank you very much for joining us on our book review. Today we look at your book, Diary of a Part-Time Ghost. What is the book about?
Well, it's first of all, it's an adventure story. It's a fun, humorous story. And it's about a character called Ash, a young boy, who gets a book for his birthday, and he doesn't realize it, but when he starts to read it, it takes him back into the past, into history. And as a child, I'm not an American, but I've always had this fascination with the Boston Tea Party. It's the beginning of the American Revolution, when the Americans, they weren't called Americans at that point, but the Americans were rebelling against the monarchy, the British monarchy, and they dumped the tea, all this shiploads of tea into the harbor. And that always, as a child, that just fascinated me. So when Ash, the character, gets sent back into the past, he gets sent back to this point in American history where he's witnessing all that's going on behind and the scenes, and also during this act of rebellion.
Excellent. So what inspired you to write about this? Because we're here talking about ghosts, we're talking about a lot of history. What inspired this writing?
Well, first of all, I have a very busy mind. I'm always daydreaming. I'm a daydreamer. So if I'm not doing something like being forced to work, I'll be daydreaming. Mm. So I think of these crazy scenarios. I love to imagine different things. Part of it was because I've always been a writer. I love writing. And at the time that I started thinking about this book, I was actually thinking about writing a story aimed at young readers. I mean, young meaning sort of maybe teenagers, to really motivate them to think about their place in history and their place in the world. I find that age group is a very critical age group. It's where they're trying to decide where they stand, what they stand for, if they stand for anything at all. And a lot of them feel, well, powerless. They don't feel that they actually have an ability to do anything in the world. So as I was thinking about this idea I really wanted to write about, then this character, Ash, came to mind, and I began to formulate, well, what would happen to this character? And he starts off as this very passive, disinterested youth who really doesn't want to get into trouble, doesn't want to put himself out there in the world to do anything at all, positive or negative. And then he gets put into a situation where he's forced to really reevaluate what his priorities are and what his place is in history.
And as you've mentioned, a lot of history in here. We're looking at the American Revolution. So throughout the book, a lot of going back into history, and American history for that matter. What is history's place in modern day?
In the sense that, although this is a historical event, first of all, as I said, it's an adventurous period of time. I mean, there's a lot happening. So I think just in terms of a novel that's enjoyable, it's a great read, and it's a fun time in history to explore. But I think a lot of the lessons that came out of that time period for this character apply even more so today. You know, the American Revolution was started by a very small group of people who were unhappy with what was going on in the world, in their world. Likewise, I think youth have to look around and say, well, is this what we want in the world? Is this what we want in our country, in our community, in our world? And then to make a decision about what to do about it. And my hope is that the decision process leads to positive action, not violence or negative action, and that's what Ash has to decide himself. What path do I take? Do I take a path that will be proactive and positive and constructive, or do I sit on the fence and become part of the negative, destructive elements around him?
And of course, Ash begins out as a very reserved character, and then it's all about he now starts being more proactive, getting his voice out there. Would you say that this is a book for that 11-year-old, 12 to 16-year-old, a book in which that can motivate them not to just take the back seat, but to stand up for what they believe?
Very much so. In fact, my hope is really that this group of youth, that age group particularly, I mean, adults have read this and enjoyed it, but my focus was really that young age group of, just pre-adult, when they're really trying to decide what they're going to do in their life, that they make that decision to say, we're going to take a moral stand and we're going to be actively participating in making our world, our country, our community a better place for everyone.
So there's the ghost that comes in and whisks, what's his name? Ash away. What is that about?
It's true. I have this fascination with the paranormal, generally speaking, in my writing. Yeah. But Ash actually transforms into this ghost. So he starts off as a live young man in modern day, and he becomes this ghost in the past. And it's really more of a metaphor, because I think a lot of youth and even adults feel invisible in the world, feel that they really can't influence what goes on around them. They're like a ghost. They just float through the world, but they can't participate or make changes to it. And so Ash starts off as this ghost who really can't do anything. He can just watch. That's all he can do. He just watches what goes on around him. Float around and watch, or can I actively do help this person I'm making a friend with? And so he realizes he actually does have the power to become visible and able to do things, but he has to make that decision, and he really has to focus on that. Yeah. And I think that is the same, that's true for us, even though we're not ghosts. We have to make that decision and focus on becoming visible and having a voice and being active in our communities.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of adventure, and it's really a fun book to read. Wouldn't you say just grab it and read for fun of it, and just the different adventurous experiences that Ash goes through?
Yeah, it's ultimately a fun, adventurous story. I mean, I've had 10-year and 11-year-olds read it, and I've had 50-something, 60-something-year-olds read it, and they've all enjoyed it in different ways. So you can read it simply at a superficial level as just a fun, frivolous novel, but there's also this other message that goes on underneath where Ash really has to assess himself. In terms of how I write it, I would say it's a fairly modern style, in the sense that it's fast-moving. It's not kind of doing a lot of heavy descriptions. It's a lot of dialogue and a lot of movement. And that's true of, I think, of most of my books, is that it doesn't slow down with a lot of, let's describe this flower in detail. No, the flower is red, move on. Yeah.
Where can this book be found, and why should anybody buy it?
Oh, I love that question. They should buy it because it's fun, it's a great read, and you'll learn something about it. You'll learn something about what I find a very interesting aspect of history, but also about human nature and about the power of youth. As to where, it's available on Amazon. It's available both as a paper book, but also as Kindle. And for those who are maybe not as familiar with ebooks, you can download a free app on your phone, whether it's an iPhone or Samsung, any kind of phone that you can download apps on. You can download it on a computer, on a tablet. You can download for free from Amazon a Kindle app that allows you to read ebooks on whatever device you have. So I'm actually a very strong proponent of the e-industry, of e-economy. I think ebooks are definitely have a strong future. And I think for Kenya, where we have high costs of publishing, but also just distribution is so difficult, I would really encourage, particularly the youth, to think about looking at ebooks. We also have eKitabu, which is a local ebook platform that has been recently set up, and to explore that aspect, because that also offers a cheaper method to access books.
Vera Desani, thank you very much for talking to us in our book review, Diary of a Part-Time Ghost. Thank you.